It has been a very hot week in Central Oregon. 90s, upper 90s. Yesterday, I took a bike ride at about 5 in the afternoon, and it was probably 97 degrees. I rode 10 miles through the park, Minto Brown Park. I think I've talked about that before. I get back, and my stepson, of course, had been upstairs in his air-conditioned room playing video games. He came down a little later, and he said, "Where you been?" I said, "I was out riding the bike in 95-degree weather." He goes, "Sounds horrid." I thought it was a great word. He's got a great vocabulary. So it was horrid, but I enjoyed it. I got back in the shade, and it was much cooler back there, so that was a lot of fun. So it's Tim Patterson, Trade Show Guy. This is Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. So glad you could join me this week. We help small to medium-sized businesses take their trade show marketing to the next level with consultation and either new exhibits or exhibit upgrades. I have a couple of books out. Here's one of them, Trade Show Superheroes and Exhibiting Zombies. The other is called Trade Show Success, 14 Proven Steps to Take Your Trade Show Marketing to the Next Level. They're both available on Amazon. But you know, if you are in the exhibit world and you're interested in, doing some more work in the exhibit world and upgrading your exhibit, give me a call. I'll send you a copy. I really will, yeah. So today on the podcast/vlog, I have a cool and fun interview to share with a guy I ran across online named Thor Conklin. He has some interesting stories, without a doubt. His company is Peak Performance Group. He's out of Atlanta, and he works with companies and executives to help them break through to their next level of achievement. So we had some fun stuff to talk about. On this interview, we touch upon micro commitments, the daily little things that really count. Execution killers, what holds you back, because execution is everything. And what happened when he lost a third of his team on 9/11. So here's how that interview went. It's Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. I'd like to welcome Thor Conklin from Peak Performers to the program. Thor, it's great to have you. I've never interviewed someone named Thor, so there's a first every day, I think. So thanks for joining me.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So tell me about, you have the company, is it Peak Performers? Am I missing, what's the name of the company?
Peak Performance Group.
Peak Performance Group, okay. And tell me just a little bit about that, how long that's been going and where that grew out of.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty interesting story. So we're an executive coaching firm and a profitability consulting firm. And it was started about 3 years ago, and it was actually birthed as a result of me killing my sixth company. I couldn't figure out how to make a profit. So I said, well, what would be a great, next company to start? Let's start a profitability consulting firm, because I definitely figured out how not to do it.
Right.
You would think on the sixth one, after having 5 successful starts and exits, that they should all just keep rolling. And I learned, and it was a big shock that something wasn't right. I was missing something. So I didn't want to see anybody else go through the pain that I had to go through.
So when you say executive coach, do you work one-on-one with like a CEO or those upper level management, or do you work with companies, or is it both?
Yeah, actually both. Great question. So a lot of times it starts with the CEO, and as they get results, they're like, well, wait a second, our sales team could use some help, or our CFO could use some help, or so it generally expands from there. But if the leader's not doing what's necessary, it's obviously difficult to have a great organization.
And you also are, I can tell you're comfortable in front of a mic and a camera. You have a podcast. Tell me about the podcast.
Thanks. Peak Performers Podcast, where I interview peak performers, whether it's business, that's the majority of it, folks. But I have people on for relationships, health and fitness. To me, it's interesting because clients come to me and they're like, okay, I need help in my business. I'm like, great. So how are things going in your relationship? They're like, no, I need help in my business. I'm like, great. Let's figure out the foundation first. How's your health? How's your mind? How's your relationships? Then we can talk about the business, because if the other ones aren't there to support it, we're just limping along.
I would agree, and so you have to kind of look at the holistic view of your life and the relationships in business and personal, friendships, your financial status, all those types of things tie into how you can move forward effectively or not. I would very much agree with you. You sent me some great information, and one thing that kind of stood out to me is you've done some physical mental challenges, I'm sure, every year, including the going through SEAL training with U.S. Navy SEALs. You climbed the mountain. You're doing the Ironman this year. Okay, let's touch on that. What's going on with that?
So I'm in the middle of Ironman training. I've got about 11 weeks left. I actually added in another Ironman a couple of weeks before the one I was initially scheduled for, just so I didn't have to train as much. I figured if I ran a race, my coach would have to rest me like a horse. And that's actually going to be true, but now I've got two to prepare for. But it was really about taking what I wasn't able to do. I wasn't able to swim 2.4 miles. I've never ran a marathon, and 112 miles on a bike and do that all in one day in 17 hours seemed impossible to me back in November. And it's about doing little things every single day where you just start to get stronger. And I'll put them all together. And September 30th, I'll finish under 17 hours, 140-mile day.
So you got 2.5 months, and it's coming up. So
it's coming up. I just got done with the pool. I probably got some chlorine still.
So the swimming, interesting. If you asked me to ski 50 miles downhill, I would do that any day of the week. As long as there's good snow, right? I'm a ski bum, so.
Yeah.
And I bicycle a lot. But yeah, I think it's great. Let's talk about those. You talk about micro commitments. I think that's what you're referring to a little bit every day.
Yeah.
So what are they, and how do they help to move us forward? I'm just curious what your input on that is.
Yeah. So what I found in my life, and everything that we do in our organization as a result of me being the first client, and me continuing to be the client, because it wasn't really to fix other people's issues. It was about trying to fix my own issue. I was like, I had this. My go-to was, let me figure out how I just go from A to Z in one move, right? It's like not about taking little chunks. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And I realized that everything I was trying to do, I was trying to make these huge leaps. And I realized the secret was that just take a little bit every single day and you start to stack them. You start to make great results. I've got 540 episodes of the podcast I started 2.5 years ago. If you told me how to do 550 episodes in 2.5 years, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But it just started with one, and then one, and one, and one, and one. And pretty soon you turn around. It's like, wow, it really created something. So micro commitments are every single day I wake up and I said, okay, what can I do that is going to move the needle? I'm not trying to solve the issue. I'm not trying to get from A to Z, but what can I do to just move the needle a little bit? You brought up the Ironman. I'm not a great swimmer. So when the last half Ironman I did, which was 70 miles, I'm swimming in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's a 1.5 mile course. You can't even see kind of where you turn, but there's buoys that keep you on track. And as I was swimming, I wasn't trying to figure out how to get to the finish line. I was trying to figure out how to just get to the next buoy. Right. So I get to the next buoy, then I do a little, breaststroke and then catch my breath a little bit. I'm like, all right, I just got to get to the next buoy. And even on the run, it was a little run, it was a little jog, but it was all about getting to the next stop sign. And then when I got to the stop sign, I said, let's just go 10 more feet. And I just did that throughout the entire race. And all of a sudden you turn around, that was 13 miles, but it was just, a couple 50-yard steps at the same, one after another.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, because it does. If you just kind of take the little bit of thing that you need to do right now and get you that far, and then what's next? I took a year of training for Sandler Sales and learned a lot of great things out there. But one thing that really stood out is kind of the same concept. And that is, if you control your behavior, don't worry about the outcome. Yeah. You just control your behavior. And so the outcomes will take care of themselves as long as you are doing what you need to do on a daily basis, breaking it down to the smallest piece. And that's really, that concept has really helped me. So
yeah, we talk about critical actions all the time.
Yeah, and you also talk about the execution killers, things that keep you from getting your goals. I'm sure there's a lot of those, but where do you come in on that?
Yeah, what I initially found was, as humans, we run around thinking that we're missing something. We go from seminar to seminar. We go from book to book. We go from podcast to podcast. And we're constantly in this search of trying to figure out what we're missing.
The shiny object syndrome. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, what is it? And what happens is we just keep piling more and more stuff into our lives, and we're overwhelmed and we can't execute because we're just bogged down. 95% of the time, when executives or business owners, teams are not executing at the highest, it's not because they're missing something. They need to eliminate something. There's something getting in the way. They've got a Ferrari, they've got the thing floored, but they also have the emergency brake pulled, but they don't know they have it pulled. So I started to sit down and say, okay, what is getting in the way of execution? And I figured I'd come up with the 5 things that get in the way of execution. And then it was 10, then it was 20. I was like, wait a second. So at this point, I've identified 85 different things that get in the way of execution. And there's probably another 85.
Probably, yeah. Give me just 2 or 3. I'm just curious.
Trying to do too much. As a matter of fact, I got don't have a plan. There's no accountability. Trying to go from A to Z instead of just making individual small movements. Your rituals, misinterpreting motion with action, doing the urgent but not the important.
A lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, going on and on. So actually at our podcast, I've done probably about 14 or 15 different episodes on some of these things.
Well, one more topic I'm curious to ask you about, and then we'll figure out where people can find you and your podcast, things like that. And that is one of the things that caught my eye when you sent me your bio and things like that is on 9/11 you lost a third of your team in the attacks on the World Trade Center, and that obviously had a great effect on you. So tell me a little bit about that.
I was fortunate not to be there. I had moved to Atlanta prior to that. I was there for 5 days, actually, in August of 2001, and my team was there. Some got out, obviously. Some did not. It was devastating to the company, but it's you learned how you've got to just regroup. You've got to keep moving. It was a small decision back 4 years before that prevented me. I actually started my first business a year before that. So I started, my team was there, but it was as a result of me putting a line in the sand. I was in private equity and we were doing M&A deals. And I was stuck in the office for the second Halloween in a row when my kids were out trick-or-treating. And I said, I don't want to live my life this way.
Right.
And the line in the sand, I said, when the opportunity arises, I want to get out of New York. I want to do my own thing. And I don't want to be enslaved to somebody else and their directives. And as a result of making that decision, that got me to Atlanta. I was here at that time and had started my own business. So there were some interesting lessons too from the survivors and some of the people that did not survive as well. And that is, if you made a decision quickly and you acted, we were in the second tower, we were in the south tower, so we were second tower hit. After the first tower got hit, you had a decision. You could take the elevator, you could take the stairs, you could do anything. But if you wasted time, if you pondered what action you were going to take, many of those people perished. It's the ones that decided, I need to take action. I don't know what the right action might be, but I'm going to take some action. You could have gotten out anyway that you could have. And it reminds me in all aspects of life that sometimes we don't know the right path to choose, but while we're moving down the path, taking action, taking movement, constantly moving is a much better strategy than pondering.
Yeah, and given that was 17 years ago almost, it seems like the distant past in a way, but I'm sure that it just is kind of part of the foundation of your daily life in a sense. It's there. Yeah. It's never going away. So yeah.
No. I mean, it was my office for 12 years. I lost one of my best buddy there, as well as 76 people that I knew. So yeah, it's very impactful. I've not been back. I'd like to go back at some point, but as you said, it's 17 years, but still raw and real.
I'm sure. So where can people find you and the podcast? I'm just curious, online, what's the best thing?
Yeah. Fortunately, with a name like Thor Conklin, I have the first 16 or 17 pages of Google all to myself. So I'm pretty easy to find. Thank goodness I'm not Bob Smith. So you can look at me, find me at thorconklin.com. Facebook's Thor Conklin. The podcast is Peak Performers Podcast. It's .net. You can find it there, or you can find it on Libsyn or iTunes or Google. Gotcha. It's all over the place.
Is there a story behind how you got the name Thor? I'm just curious.
Yeah, actually it is. So my given name is Randall.
Okay.
And it's about 18 years ago. I just used it in jest one day, and then literally it started to take traction more and more. It's something that will actually be converted to my legal name this year in 2018.
Huh.
So my mom still calls me Randy, but everybody else calls me Thor. But really what the thing is, if I could show you what, can I show you?
Yeah. All right. He's going off camera for a second. Hang on. Oh, I like that in the background. It says, be badass every day. That's a good inspiration.
So this is a statue. It's called the Self-Made Man. It's by Bobby Carlisle. And it's, for those that aren't seeing the video, if you're hearing this on audio, it's about a man carving himself out of a block of granite.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this represents Thor to me. And every day I wake up and I try to figure out how to become a better version than I was yesterday. And it's about removing those things that no longer belong. So, I'll answer to Randy, but Thor is who I am.
Thor's who you are, yeah. All right. Cool, Thor. I really appreciate you spending time with me. And again, appreciate your time and sharing your story with you and your tips as well. So thanks again, Thor.
Yeah. And, the other thing is, if I could do for your listeners,
sends
me a 50-word or less email with the biggest problem that they're facing in their business. They can send that to Thor@ThorConklin.com. I'll respond to that personally. I'll send you back a 4-step system that will absolutely eliminate that problem, or at the very least, reduce it to the point where it's no longer a big issue.
I love it. Thanks again, Thor. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. And
thanks again to Thor Conklin of Peak Performance Group for joining me on this week's Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. You'll notice I'm wearing tie-dye today. It's my Bob Marley big spliff tie-dye shirt that I found online. I just had to have. And it's not true tie-dye. It's actually printed tie-dye. It's kind of weird, but I still like the shirt. What the heck? So, this week's Trade Show Tip of the Week comes from the book, Trade Show Superheroes and Exhibiting Zombies. I'm going to give you a short version of the longer list. The longer list is 27 unboring things to do at your next trade show because, you don't want to be boring at a trade show. You want to be able to draw people in with unboring stuff. So what you might do, one of the things I do is before leaving your office, spend some time on Twitter compiling a list of people at the show who are involved on Twitter. There are tweeters. Make a list of who they are and what booth they're from. Stop by the booth and say, hey, I found you on Twitter. People always like that. Draw attention to yourself and your company. I've seen people wear goofy hats. I've seen people wear red wigs, a pair of Mickey Mouse ears, Homer Simpson slippers. Anything unusual is a conversation starter. Pick up literature from as many booths as possible. Pick up all the stuff. Go back to your hotel room that night. Write down questions about that stuff. Go back to those booths the next day and ask about the stuff that they are sending out literature from. Use your phone's video camera and ask visitors to explain why they stopped by your booth. Just put them on the spot. Say, why are you here? What are you finding here? What do you see here? Or go around the floor on your break and get a few comments from other exhibitors about the show and what their experience is at the show. Number 5, take a lot of photos. Photos are great. If you see a cool booth, ask permission for a photo. I always do. I say, hey, you got a great booth. Can I take a picture of it? And I've never had anyone say no. They always say yes. But it's always nice to ask permission first. If you connect with someone via Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, put it online. Put a picture online. Number 6, bring chocolates, and instead of handing them, putting them in a bowl at your booth, hand them out as you go from booth to other exhibitors. So, nice sized chocolates, and tape your business card to them. And say, I'm down at booth blank. Okay, there you go. And number 7, this may be kind of old fashioned because I don't know how many people use thumb drives. They're still out there, flash drives, But buy a bunch of thumb drives and put your company information on them. Brochures, current press releases, catalogs, website, and so on, and have them ready to hand out to a few well-qualified media contacts or potential clients. Great information. And the list, by the way, goes on to 27 unboring things to do at your next trade show. So there you go. All right. One good thing this week. I want to share with you one good thing. I've been listening this morning and yesterday to REM's early catalog. Now, you got to go back to 1983. Their first album came out called Murmur. And I had a roommate at the time. I was not quite 30, but we listened, somehow we got onto that, and we listened to this thing over and over again. Then they had a new album out the next year called Reckoning in 1984, and the next year in 85 it was Fables of the Reconstruction. 1986, Life's Rich Pageant and Document came out in 1987. And those 5 albums, I don't know, I was a big REM fan, got to see them once, later years, probably in the 90s. Terrific performance, great group. And after that, to me, they kind of changed. They still put great albums out, but those first 5 or so were just astonishingly alternative rock. They kind of defined it for the 80s and leading into the 90s. And of course, they had a great career. Eventually hung it up. I think Michael Stipe is still out there doing things, and the other guys as well. But the group is gone. But those first 5 albums, I'm going to call them this week's one good thing. So that's it. We'll wrap it up, tie-dye and all. And Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Thanks again for joining me, and hope to catch you next week here.